Hey guys, I'm Kelly T and I'm talking to you today about some black metal from the UK. There's some big sounds coming out of the UK, I've got to say. I mean, there's big black metal sounds coming out of everywhere, but the UK is actually really grabbing me at the moment. They're smashing my sensory system from that part of the world with a sound that's just often fueled with so much aggression, war and temper, some of my favourite sounds. Suffering is a 5-piece black metal band out of England in the UK and are forging their own path with some absolutely raw, refreshing and unrelenting blackness within their dark creation, which is the album titled 11, and it was released in 2018. What stood out for me the most with this album, aside from the deadly musicianship, I got to call that out, the raw and abrupt delivery that was maintained, yet there was a very good production about this as well. But the diversity, the diverse flow to each track, with some songs just flying in my face with, straight out of the book of True Cult. Other tracks taking on a more first wave punk type flow with those smashing punk and rock beats. And then there was some really British tracks that threw a slower burn and a real foreboding ambience of savagery toward me as the listener. So it really does give you everything within this album, and it was really, really big. Aside from everything I've already mentioned, there's definitely some brilliant old school thrashing moments in this album. I heard influences of Slayer throughout this, Judas Priest. I'd love to know if this is some of the band's influences, because I definitely heard that in the way of some of these riff patterns and the melodies as well. As soon as I heard the first track, Shan Shu, I think it's pronounced, it really did whip my ass with some absolutely crushing riff patterns. It just took that little fucker of a track so dark, and I knew I was on a promise right there that this album was going to be killer good, and it truly did bleed me dry. Moving on to track 2, Releasing the 11. This was so different from the start of the album and stood out strong by the way of the mix-up of tempo to a more ferocious punk first wave beat and flow, which I thoroughly loved hearing. Very big, imposing vocals. Again, those deadly guitar patterns that just made me screw my face up so hard. Then track 3, Diary of a Streetwalker, slows the full throttle pace to a slower burn of impending doom. That doom that I reflected on earlier, and I was really loving the contrast of each track so far. And as I continued to listen through this album, there really was a different experience within each and every track. It is such a diverse black metal journey all the way through to this album's completion. Conjuration Through Black Horns, what a name. This one just took me away with apathetic beats, sounds of melancholy, and a softer guitar passage starting this track off before it absolutely hurled me, taking skin off into a cesspool of all things ritualistic and unholy. The melody within this track felt off-centered somewhat and mysterious, and I guess this is a good part of why I was suckered into this track so hard. I'm so weak for those obscurities. Whew, this was a big track. This grew on me immensely the more I listened through this album, and it has to be my ultimate pick. All 8 tracks, they're so dark, they're hateful, and they're brooding. They're just such a brooding experience. A great diverse listen, as I mentioned, with themes around Satanism, death, of course, and it's extra doomful, and you actually feel that said doom alongside the overall rawness and callousness of the soundscapes throughout this entire album. Vocally, this was such a skulking, hissing, abrupt vocal fold execution. It made me just sit up and listen almost like I was being brainwashed. The overall feeling I have of this album, I guess I'm trying to get out, is that I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a deadly album. I was submerged in their ritual for the last few days, and it's definitely one that you appreciate the more you listen through. So go on to Bandcamp, have a listen to this. Follow these lads, follow Suffering on Facebook, follow them on Instagram. And to Suffering, this is fan-bloody-tastic, guys. Keep the black torch burning. I absolutely loved this album. I'm Kelly T. That's been my albums of the week.